In Washington, a phone rang with news from Lagos. Henry Kissinger, the most powerful diplomat in the world, said nothing for the public record. He didn't need to. 5 weeks earlier, in Addis Ababa, in front of every African head of state, a Nigerian general had stood up and told the world exactly what he thought of American foreign policy in Africa. Now, he was gone. The ambush, February 13th, 1976. Lagos, Nigeria. Friday morning. A black Mercedes moved through traffic near Alagbon Junction, Ikoyi. No convoy, no outriders, no armored escort. The man in the back seat was the head of state of Africa's most powerful country, but he had always refused to travel like one. He said a leader who needed walls of soldiers between himself and his people was a leader who had already lost. That morning, the walls were not there. Soldiers burst from a petrol station, gunfire. His aide-de-camp was killed instantly. The head of state was shot multiple times at close range in the back of his own car. Within minutes, a voice was on national radio announcing a coup. By the time most Nigerians heard the news, General Murtala Muhammed was already dead. He had been in power for exactly 200 days. This is the story of those 200 days that terrified a superpower. The general. To understand who Murtala Muhammed was, you have to understand what Nigeria was in 1975. Oil had transformed the country. The revenues coming in from the wells of the Niger Delta were unlike anything an African country had ever managed. Nigeria was not just the most populous nation on the continent, it was becoming its most powerful. And the man who took power on July 29, 1975, understood exactly what that power was for. He came to power in a coup, overthrowing his predecessor, Yakubu Gowon, a man whose administration had become synonymous with waste, corruption, and drift. Gowon had famously said Nigeria's problem was not money, but how to spend it. He had been spending it badly. Murtala Muhammed had a different idea. Within weeks of taking power, he did something Nigeria had never seen. He walked into the federal civil service and fired 10,000 people in a single day. Not restructured, not reviewed. Fired. For corruption, for incompetence, for years of feeding at the state's table while delivering nothing. The civil servants who survived said you could hear the sound of the purge spreading from ministry to ministry, floor by floor, like a fire moving through dry grass. Nigeria had never been governed like this. Fast, direct, ruthless in the best sense of the word. And then he announced that Nigeria's capital was moving away from Lagos, the colonial city, the commercial city, the city of Western businessmen and British infrastructure, to a new place in the country's geographic center, a place that would belong to everyone, a place called Abuja. But it was not the domestic reforms that put him on a collision course with Washington. It was Angola. Angola. In 1975, Portugal's colonial empire collapsed almost overnight. Angola, a country sitting on vast oil reserves on the southwestern corner of Africa, was suddenly without a government. 3 armed factions rushed to fill the vacuum. The Americans backed one. The South Africans invaded to back another. The Soviets and Cubans backed the third. Henry Kissinger was running the American operation through the CIA, covert funding, arms shipments, proxies. The entire Cold War playbook. And Murtala Muhammed looked at what was happening on the African continent and said, no. In January 1976, the Organization of African Unity convened an emergency summit in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. The question before every head of state in that room was simple. Which government would Africa recognize as the legitimate ruler of Angola? The Americans had been working the phones. working the diplomatic circuits, making it clear that recognizing the Soviet-backed empire would have consequences. Africa has come of age. Murtala Muhammed stood up. Witnesses who were in the room described what happened next as the moment the temperature changed. He said, Africa had come of age. He said the days of sitting quietly while foreign powers made decisions about African soil were finished. He said Nigeria was tired of being lectured, tired of being pressured, tired of pretending that Western intervention in Africa was anything other than what it had always been. He pledged financial backing to the Murtala cause, and he told the assembled leaders that if they allowed South Africa's military invasion of Angola to stand, they had already surrendered the continent. The vote went against the Americans. The OAU recognized the empire. South Africa eventually withdrew. Cuba's intervention, already on the ground, was legitimized by African consensus. Kissinger's operation was publicly humiliated. Nigeria, under Murtala Muhammed, had done what no African nation had ever done, walked directly into the middle of a Cold War confrontation and changed the outcome. Everything else Kissinger saw. There were other things Kissinger could not have missed. Murtala had nationalized British Petroleum's Nigerian operations in direct retaliation for Britain's tacit support of white minority rule in Zimbabwe. The British government had not expected this. They were furious. He had refused to receive Kissinger personally. Kissinger had been visiting African capitals in the weeks before the Angola summit, trying to build diplomatic support for the American position. Nigeria, the most powerful country on the continent, closed its door. An African head of state had publicly refused the United States Secretary of State. That had not happened before. 5 weeks. 5 weeks after the Angola speech, Murtala Muhammed was dead. Colonel Bukar Suka Dimka led the coup attempt. He evaded capture for 3 weeks, tried before a military tribunal, executed by firing squad at Bar Beach, Lagos, before crowds who came to watch. Dozens of other officers were executed alongside him. The investigation pointed toward a network, some connected to the exiled former head of state Yakubu Gowon, who was in the United Kingdom at the time. The British government denied any knowledge. Gowon was eventually cleared, though forced into years of exile. The CIA connection was never proven, never formally established, never officially investigated by any authority with the power to compel testimony from American officials. But John Stockwell, the CIA officer who ran the Angola operation and later wrote a book called In Search of Enemies, described in detail the climate of coup plotting against African leaders sympathetic to the empire at exactly that time. He stopped short of a direct accusation.
We've set out to overthrow functioning constitutional democracies in over 20 countries.
He did not need to go further. The timing spoke for itself. 5 weeks. Speech to assassination. 5 weeks. What outlasted him? What followed Murtala's death was, in one way, a miracle. His deputy, General Olusegun Obasanjo, took power and honored every promise Murtala had made. The civilian transition remained on schedule. In 1979, Nigeria became one of the first African countries to see a voluntary military-to-civilian handover of power, a democratic election, a new constitution. Murtala had set the clock. Obasanjo ran it out. The Abuja project continued. The nationalized oil assets stayed nationalized. The things he had built in 200 days, the decisions that could not be undone by a bullet in a traffic jam, outlasted him. In 2026, 50 years after his assassination, his face still looks out from the Nigerian 20 naira note. Every market transaction, every Lagos bus fare, every roadside sale, Murtala Muhammed circulates in the hands of a country he governed for less than 7 months. The airport that was once named after the colonial city is now Murtala Muhammed International Airport. The road where his car was ambushed is now Murtala Muhammed Way. And in the conversations happening across social media, in Nigeria, in Burkina Faso, in Senegal, in Ghana, young Africans debating whether the revolutionary government of Ibrahim Traore is a modern Murtala Muhammed, his name keeps appearing. Because what he represented was not a program or a policy, it was a possibility. The possibility that an African leader could look at the world's most powerful nation, refuse to be managed by it, and build something real in the space that refusal created. He had 200 days. He spent all of them. The idea survived. Back to February 13, 1976. Back to the black Mercedes. Back to the gunfire at Alagbon Junction. The soldiers who killed him believed they were ending something. They were wrong. 5 weeks earlier, in Addis Ababa, Murtala Muhammed had stood up in front of every African head of state and told them what was possible. The speech survived the bullet. The idea survived. And 50 years later, it is still the most dangerous thing an African leader can do. Stand in front of the world and tell a superpower, no, not yet, but soon. And when enough of them do, at the same time, the world will look different. If you want to see that moment, subscribe.